Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic. Let's do it. When have you ever feared for your life? Why? Serious. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I got caught in a riptide while stupidly swimming alone in the ocean. I was minding my own business, walking in like 2 feet of water at the beach, holding my toddler. There was a massive clay pit that had opened up in the shallow water, but the water was murky, so I didn't see it. I slid into it, and the water was just deep enough to go over my head, because I couldn't stand up due to how slimy it was. It was shaped like a bowl. I couldn't swim up because my feet were just sliding into muck, and it felt like an undertow. Just when I started breathing in water, my knee hit a rock in the side of the pit, so I put my foot on it and launched us up. The lifeguards didn't do anything even after someone called us an ambulance to make sure we didn't dry drown. We were under for maybe 20 seconds. So I was 14 walking home from the bus stop as I did every day. It was about a mile from the bus stop to my house. I'd walk home about halfway with a friend of mine before he turned off to go home. About 2 blocks from our bus stop, a guy started walking with us. This was in a major city, so it wasn't the first time someone started randomly talking to us. What was weird was that he wasn't crazy or weird. He was pretty normal. He was asking about our lives, asking about what was going on. Randomly, he asked about what we'd been up to the last Friday night. We both said the same thing, that we'd been home with our families, which was true. Even though he didn't sound crazy, this guy was giving bad vibes. Something was off. We got to the turnoff point where my buddy would go to his house. He said goodbye and left to go home. By the way, I don't blame him for doing this, regardless of what happened next. So this guy keeps walking with me. Bad vibes continue, but he hasn't said anything directly threatening yet. We get to a cross street and he says, "Don't run. My boys are right across the street." Then I look and realize about 4 guys are following directly across the street. And that's when it all sinks in. The bad vibes are real. I could have tried to run at this point. I had a friend who only lived a block away, but I decided not to. Maybe I just thought it was pointless. I kept talking to him. We talked for a mile more as we walked, and he told me that his brother had been stabbed around where my bus was let off a few days before, and I fit the description. He said he'd gotten out of the life, but was back to avenge his brother. I told him that it wasn't me. He asked me if I was taking drugs. I said I'd effed around with pot, but nothing more. He believed me. We kept walking. Eventually, he started talking about why he'd gotten out of the life, and that I needed to stay on the right path. Eventually, we got back to my house. He said that he was glad he talked to me, because initially, he was just going to shoot me and walk away. But he believed me, and was glad he hadn't. He waved his boys away, who were down the block. Then he left, and wished me the best. I told my parents, reported it to the cops, didn't sleep for a few nights, and eventually moved on, but yeah, I almost died right there. I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say 2 wrongs don't make a right, and hopefully that guy got out again before we learned that lesson. Rocket attack in Iraq. I just remember thinking, I don't want to die like this, as debris rained down on my room's roof. Utter feeling of impotence. It was easier getting shot at. Playing an outdoor game we call 007 at age 11, where you get dropped off a distance away from a home base and you have to sneak back in the dark without being spotted by your driver, who would call you out if they saw you while driving around the neighborhood. Me and a friend were sneaking through irrigation canals to be off main roads, not through people's properties. Those were fenced off. And someone whose backyard we were sneaking past cocked a shotgun and fired a warning shot into the ground of his yard. We crawled on our stomachs in the canal until we were far enough away. Pretty scary at 11. I was in medical school and a code silver was called. Didn't know what was going on until everyone was barricading all the doors and everyone was hiding in a single office, which was barricaded with chairs. I soon found out that a code silver was an active shooter. We heard screaming from upstairs and shooting. A few minutes later, smelled smoke and water was dripping from the ceiling. The shooter tried to light the hospital on fire before he took the gun to himself, and the sprinkler systems kicked in and flooded the entire hospital. When evacuating, and we were even afraid to open the doors from our barricaded door for the cops because we didn't know whether we could trust them due to the chaos. Early December of last year, me and some mates were at a small beach town southwest of Western Australia. There was a small island just off the shore, maybe 200 meters or so, that seemed within swimming distance. I was a very confident swimmer as I grew up in Australia, and knowing how to swim here is like knowing how to tie your shoes. So, we set off to the island. Around 3/5 of the way there, I realized I was getting really tired, so I was stuck with two options. Continue to the island, which was now slightly closer, and get my breath back to eventually return to the mainland, turn back to the mainland. I chose two. My friends continued to the island, clearly a lot more fit than I was. Upon turning back, I realized just how far we'd gone from the mainland. This is where I start to panic. My body was already incredibly tired, and I still had all that way to go. I maybe continued another 40 meters toward the mainland when I realized the waves were pushing me away from the mainland as well. I had made no progress. This is where I started having thoughts that I may just die here. I had eventually given up on my physical ability to swim and just tread water. I started swallowing a lot of water that I could barely keep my head above anymore. There was a boat going past maybe 50 meters away from me. I managed to let my last bit of strength out to scream for help. I'm not sure if they didn't hear me or not, but they just went on and never came back. Fortunately for me, who did hear me were some of my mates who stayed on the mainland. They got some fellow beachgoers with surfboards out to help me. They did just that. I haven't been swimming in the ocean since, and now have a massive fear of something I once loved. I went to Florida for my friend's birthday about a month ago, which just so happened to fall on spring break. We witnessed a shooting while at a bar and had to duck and then evacuate. It was my first time ever hearing an actual gunshot. Still remember all the people screaming and running. I mean, comedically speaking, that first sentence, you could have just ended it there. Epidural went up instead of down for my C-section. First, I tasted something gross in my mouth. Then I couldn't breathe properly and told the doctor, but he didn't believe me. Just told me to breathe deeply. Then I fell asleep. So I obviously coded for a while after that bullshit. I was so scared while everything was going numb, and I mean numb. My mom was hospitalized with cancer when I was in college, so for a while I had to live with just my stepdad. Over time, I slowly realized that he was watching me, standing outside the bathroom while I showered, looking through the hole in my broken bedroom door, a ladder next to the bathroom window, his shadow in the window at night. I was so stressed from my mom's cancer and his actions, I developed a lot of paranoia. I was so scared he was going to kill me. I hid a knife under my pillow and croquet mallet next to my bed. I eventually told my grandparents and went to live with them, but they decided I couldn't tell my mom or tell anyone. He never touched me. I didn't have any proof that he'd watched me changed. It's just something I had to live with. I haven't really had anything to do with him since Mom died, but every time I see him in town, I hide or leave. I'm still terrified of him. I have a more light-hearted one. I heard strange noises from my basement, and though someone broke in, my heart was racing and I didn't know what to do. I kept listening down the stairs at the noise and decided it wasn't human. Turns out a woodpecker came down the flue and out the access hatch and was flying around. I managed to shoo him out the door and breathed a sigh of relief. I've had some really close calls on the road. I even drove an ambulance for 6 years, but this one I'll never forget. A head-on collision. Headed home after an evening at my folks'. It was almost midnight on a 2-lane country road, and some a-hole came out of nowhere around a corner and decided to pass 3 cars, and he was coming straight at me. I was in an 83 Jeep CJ7 with my wife and a passenger in the back, going about 60 miles per hour. The speed limit was 55, and no one was slowing down. My choices were, option 1, drop it in the ditch. But with my speed, how deep the ditch was with the steep embankment on the other side, basically a wall of earth, even if I slammed my brakes to shed some speed and veer for the ditch, at best I would roll ass over tea kettle and trash my passenger. With the roll cage sloping off at an angle in the back, it was a 50-50 if she would make it. My wife would also take the wall of earth, and if anything was sticking out from it, which there likely was, it would rip her apart. Probably the only one to survive would be me. Flipping probably would have kept me alive because of the cage. Option 2. Hug the shoulder and slam my brakes, hoping those big tires hold the road and slow us down to lessen the impact, and put it all on my side. This option probably would kill me, as I would have eaten the steering wheel and steering shaft would go through my chest. Remember, it was an '83 Jeep. But the Jeep would most likely go over and through the cab on the oncoming car, so my wife and passenger would likely make it. The oncoming car was effed, and the car they were passing would likely take a nasty blow. People were about to die. But the only real option was 2. I remember thinking, F that guy, I'm taking him with me, as I stuffed my foot to the floor and the whole front end of my Jeep dropped to its frame and my ass end lifted, but she stayed stuck to the road. The howl from my tires was louder than the horns from the oncoming cars. I remember thinking, she's a screaming banshee taking me straight to hell, and I'll never forget that sound. Luckily, the lead car, last passed car, also slammed their brakes, and with me hugging the shoulder, the passing car barely slipped between us. When he did, I looked down at him. He missed me with no more than 1 or 2 inches to spare, and I could see the whites of his eyes. It was past 11 p.m., and he was so close I could tell his eyes were blue, and that mother effer was looking up at me and smiling. All this happened in an instant, mere seconds. Time slowed down to a crawl. I felt everything, saw everything, heard everything. I never saw my life flash before my eyes, but I saw the dream of my wife and future child disappear. I was making a life and death decision, laying odds on taking a gamble in the blink of an eye. I've never been that scared in my entire life. I was 26 years old. I'm 52 now. The other motorist, a lead car being passed, they saved us that night, and I never got to thank them. I used to drive out to my folks at least once a week, and for almost a year, the rubber I laid down on the asphalt that night was still glaringly obvious. 4 big black wide streaks stained the highway. I still drive that road and always remember every time I pass through that stretch. It effing haunts me, my screaming banshee taking me straight to hell. Turned out, that Jeep, she was my angel heralding the way forward. For the record, I'm not religious, but I love metaphors. My wife and I are still together, we love each other, we're healthy, and so is our daughter who's finishing college. The 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan. I was on the 28th floor of an office tower, and the entire building began to rock back and forth like standing on the deck of a ship. We could see the next tower across the road swinging back and forth too. The elevators all shut down and the stairwell was locked, so we had zero means of escape. Honestly, thought that was it. Tried to call my wife to say goodbye, but she was driving to pick up our child from daycare and didn't even realize there had been an earthquake until she saw the news. So this is one of those things that actually bothers me too. You go in skyscrapers or high rises, and I've worked in some big buildings, and you feel that sway. It's a little unsettling for sure. Boogie boarding as a kid. Crashed on a good wave in. The board got caught in the undertow and dragged me out to sea. Then floated up, got caught in a big wave, came back and smacked me, still going the other way in the undertow in the back, and then dragged me back to shore. Then the undertow caught it again and dragged me back down and out again, with me underwater with no breath the entire time. Incoming mortar attacks on multiple occasions in Iraq. My car spun out going 55 on the highway, went across 4 lanes of traffic, somehow only hit 1 car before crashing into the center divider. Had my first heart attack at the ripe old age of 32. I didn't know that it was a heart attack because when it started, it was more like the pressure that comes with congestion. I'm young enough that even as the pressure and eventually the pain that came on was not anything that made me think, hey, I'm having a heart attack. I had to work that day, so even with worsening symptoms, I showered, grabbed my stuff, and head to the bus, so I stopped and used to get to my job. After I get on the bus, the pain starts to ramp up, but I'm still being stubborn. Having no health insurance at the time may also have impaired my judgment, so I make up my mind to just tough it out and go to work. The bus felt like it was going way slower than usual, hitting every stop for full off and onloading of passengers. Halfway to my job, I can hardly breathe, and The pain is getting to the point that it's scaring the shit out of me. Then I had this bizarre moment of clarity. When my heart finally ramped up to a whole new level, I thought, if I don't get help, I'm going to die. In my life up to that point, I had moments that left me shaking and laughing to deal with what had just happened about dodging death. I had fallen out of trees as a kid, fell off the roof of our house while helping my dad put on a new roof, went flying over the handlebars of my bike into oncoming traffic when the front tire dropped into a sewer grate. I almost got crushed between two cars, things that could have killed me but didn't leave me with anything more than the thought that I could have died. The heart attack was something else, something unique. I've had more than one heart attack now, and the pain has been different for each, as they've been in different parts of my heart. The right coronary artery feels different for the circumflex, and both were nothing compared to what my LAD was 99% blocked. But there's a chilling difference between the thought, whoa, I could have died after an accident, and the certainty when I was having my first heart attack of, if I don't get help, I am going to die. Death, as in any mortality, didn't seem quite as real when I had dodged it, but the inescapable presence of death as a tangible thing at that moment in time let me know that it was coming for me, and still had a visceral place in my brain to this day. Subsequently, I'm much calmer and less bothered by the thought of death. I accept it as the one fair thing in life. The when, the why, and the how are rarely fair, but everything dies. Hell, even our sun will die someday. I believe death and our mortality can either make us good people or drives us to be the worst we can be.